Today, I'd like to introduce you to The Corfe Castle Murders by Rachel McLean. Here's the blurb. Meet DCI Leslie Clark. She's a straight-talking copper who doesn't suffer fools gladly, and she's been transferred to rural Dorset. After being injured in a bomb attack, Leslie is presented with a choice: early retirement or a period of respite in a calmer location. But things don't stay calm for long. Before she's even started her new job, Leslie is dragged into investigating a murder at one of England's most iconic landmarks, the imposing Corfe Castle. Leslie must hit the ground running. Can she get along with her new partner DS, Dennis Frampton, a traditionalist who doesn't appreciate her style? How will she navigate the politics of a smaller force where she's a bigger and less welcome fish? And most importantly, can she solve the murder before the killer strikes again? The Corfe Castle Murders is a compelling, character-driven mystery perfect for fans of Anne Cleeves, L.J. Ross and Ellie Griffiths. Here are some reviews. It is a great start to a new series with diverse characters and clues, and a dangerous killer with so much to lose. It is a fascinating, character-driven mystery and a great read. If you enjoy crime thrillers, this is just what you need. This is the first in a new series of Dorset crime books that are definitely great reads and worth more than a look. DCI Leslie Clark is moving to start a new job there. For 6 months, she'll stay for a quiet time and to take care. With new relationships to develop and colleagues to meet, this totally won't be the quiet meet and greet. With archaeologists and secrets, adultery, murder and lies, every revelation is often another surprise. Another review. I admit to a little negative bias. For the record, I live in Dorset, and the writer chooses to have her protagonists think and see us as little more than country bumpkins. I thought I would enjoy a police procedural set in my neck of the woods, and I didn't expect to be almost ridiculed. Having said this, our DCI hails from Birmingham, where crime is probably a very different thing, and I accept the pace of life in these parts is a lot slower in general. As the first in this series, we are drip-fed details of the police team, and I found that I really wanted to see how things develop. The murders themselves are associated with an archaeological dig close to Corfe Castle, and the plot is good. Professional rivalry exists as much in academia as anywhere else, it seems. Here is my review. I have my favorite genres, as I suppose most of us do, but my choices are also influenced by times and places. With the Corfe Castle Murders, we find ourselves in Hardy country. I chose the Corfe Castle Murders because it is a detective story, and because this part of Dorset is an area I know well, used to know well. I'm talking about back in the 1970s, family holidays and weekends in Studland and Durdle, fish and chips at Corfe Castle before taking the railway to Swanage, or walking atop rolling hills to skirt Old Harry, or paddling around with a net on a cane searching for crabs and gobies in the rock pools of Kimmeridge and dancing ledges. Yes, I'm sure much has changed. I'll go back one day and have a look. DCI Leslie Clark is not an easy person to like, but that's not a bad thing, giving it more realism, I suppose. Do you like everyone you meet? That said, she does grow on me as she battles with parochialism, small town, small village politics, and office politics where a past event involving their last DCI casts a shadow. The tensions go beyond the police force. We also find ourselves in the world of academic jealousies and that strange relationship between West Country locals and tourists, the Grockles. Domestic issues amidst detective families, police associates and co-workers of victims abound throughout this fast-moving procedural tale of murder and detection. Fast-moving, yes, for 77 chapters, little scenes of their own akin to a TV show, with each scene adding evidence, adding more questions, adding more intrigue. Let's start with Chapter 1 of the Corfe Castle Murders. Layla stopped halfway up the stairs, her senses pricking. There was someone in her room. She could hear drawers being pulled out, doors being opened. Footsteps. No matter how hard the intruder tried to be stealthy, this was an old and creaky house. Was Archie back? No, Archie wasn't coming back till Monday. He had a meeting in London, something to do with securing extra funding for the dig. Now they'd uncovered evidence of 12th century occupation, they were all hopeful. Holding her breath, she took one step up. As carefully as she could see into the room she shared with Archie over the top step. It would be Crystal. The woman liked to poke her nose into other people's business. As the dig leader, she seemed to think she had the right. But their bedrooms had locks and were supposed to be private. She'd become complacent. She should remember to lock her doors every morning. The intruder came into view, facing away from Layla. She gritted her teeth. Patrick. What was that old perv doing in her room? Why was he going through her and Archie's stuff? Patrick gave her the creeps. Since he'd tried it on with her the day after she arrived, she'd steered clear of him. She didn't want any confrontation. She slid back down the stairs and opened the front door. She slammed it shut again. Humming loudly despite her unease, she stomped up the stairs. When she arrived at the top, Patrick was standing on the landing. He stared at her, hands on hips. You should tidy your room. He gestured back through the open door. Look at it, bloody disgrace. She met his eye, her stomach fluttering. Patrick was more than twice her age, the most experienced member of the group. He made her nervous. Have you been in my room? He blew a greasy grey hair out of his eyes. What do you take me for? You might want to close the door in future, though. Lock it, more like. She squeezed past him and closed her and Archie's door. Patrick watched her from the open doorway of his own room. Behind him, all was tidy, so immaculate that you could imagine no one lived in there. That's better, he grunted. She eyed him. I'm going back out. Already? It's a free country. She barreled down the stairs, her stomach churning. She'd been looking forward to a quiet few hours reading her book, maybe on her bed, maybe in the cosy sitting room downstairs. But she didn't want to be alone in the cottage with Patrick. Archie was away for his meeting, and there was no sign of Crystal. See you later, Patrick called down the stairs. Layla shuddered and closed the front door behind her. It led directly onto a narrow strip of pavement alongside an equally narrow road that cars struggled to get down. The village of Corfe Castle hadn't been designed for modern living. At least the sun was out. She'd wander up to the dig site, and then she might sit outside the Greyhound with a pint. They had benches out the front, filling another narrow pavement, and she liked to watch the world go by. She hurried along West Street, glancing behind her from time to time to check Patrick hadn't followed. Don't be paranoid. Even if he wasn't that much of a creep. She turned the corner by the entrance to the car park, then took the footpath across the fields to reach the dig site. It was quiet on a Sunday, the normal hubbub of tools and voices missing. She could hear the trill of birdsong from the trees up ahead, cars passing beyond them. They'd dug 3 trenches so far, one in the centre of the site where they believed the bailey of the King Stephen's siege castle had lain. The second had been dug near the village, where the geophysics suggested the outer wall might have been, and a smaller test trench near the mound where Layla stood. The two more established trenches had tents over them to protect them from the weather. It might be June in southern England, but you could always guarantee rain. She pushed aside the flaps of the tent closest to her, the one with the wall. She'd been working here the day before and had found coins, worn down and mud-encrusted, but hopefully from the 12th century. She wandered out over the mounds that covered suspected fortifications, heading for the second tent. Two crows rose into the sky as she approached, disturbed by her footsteps. A short distance away, a group of wood pigeons pecked at the ground. She grabbed the flap of the tent. This was where they were hoping to find the remains of a medieval building. Crystal and Patrick worked in here most days, along with a rotating crew of students from Bournemouth University. Startled by a bird flying out of the tent, Layla looked away. She batted at it as it brushed past her, but it was gone. What had it found? They were careful to clear the dig site at the end of each day, cataloguing their finds and hauling them back to the cottage. They were stored in an outhouse until they could be transferred to the university. It had been drilled into them all that there was a risk not only of animal damage, but human too. The tent was warm in the afternoon heat, muggy. There was a thick smell that made Layla's nose twitch. Someone had left a tarpaulin in the middle of the space, and flies buzzed around it. Layla bent down, puzzled. She grabbed the edge of the tarp. Had someone come in here earlier and left it behind? She lifted the tarpaulin. A cloud of flies rose up at her. She dropped the fabric, waving her hands and spitting away the flies that tried to enter her mouth. There was something under there. Her stomach lurched. This felt wrong. Crystal never left anything behind, and what was that smell? Layla lifted one hand to cover her nose and grabbed the tarpaulin with the other. She pulled it up, wishing she hadn't come here. Her mouth fell open. She was oblivious to the flies now. Her body numb, she dropped the tarp. No, she was imagining things. Gingerly, resisting the urge to close her eyes, she lifted the fabric again and screamed. Here is an excerpt from later, as things are ratcheting up and we now have a long list of suspects. Maybe some more bodies. Leslie's phone rang as she and Johnny left Susan's house. Hi, Gail. Any news? We've done some analysis on the residue from the weapon used to kill Layla. And? I'm confident the same one was used in both murders. Leslie looked over at Johnny. Same weapon, she mouthed. He nodded. Okay, she said to Gail. What kind of weapon was it? There were metal deposits found in both victims, fragments that broke off the weapon after it was used. It wasn't the most stable of objects, but the metals were a copper alloy and iron, consistent with it being an early medieval axe. Not something more recent. If it was, it would be more robust, and it would be made from different alloys. Modern steel would be in there somewhere. The sort of steel we use now wasn't really made till the late 18th century. So you're confident it was something found at the dig site? Either that, or something brought in from another site. We've got a botanist looking at spores and seed residue on the metal. See if it was local. Okay, said Leslie. Anything else to report? You remember the second victim had defensive wounds? Cracked fingernails? Uh-huh. We found fibers beneath her nails, skin cells, a couple of hairs. Fantastic, Leslie said. And we'll have to wait for the DNA analysis, Gail replied. How long will that take? Probably a couple of days. A couple of days? This is urgent, Gail. Can't you get them to hurry it up? Gail laughed. This is Dorset, and not the West Midlands. Leslie shook her head. I don't care if it's bloody Timbuktu. We've got 2 people in that house, one or both of whom could be at risk. I need to know whose DNA was under Layla's fingernails, and I need to know yesterday. Okay, Gail sounded subdued. I'll see if I can get it fast-tracked. It'll cost more, though. I don't care if it costs the chief constable's salary. I just want it done. No problem. Gail hung up. Leslie turned to Johnny as they got into the car. So now we know we've got one killer. He nodded. Makes it more likely it's going to be one of those at the house. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, she said. We wait until we get the DNA results. That will give us our man or woman, he said. Absolutely. What about the storage? He asked. Inventory? You're right, I'll call Dennis. She grabbed her phone. Boss. Dennis didn't sound happy. How are you getting on? Leslie asked him. Have you spoken to somebody at Bournemouth University? They're stalling, he said. It seems they're not all that happy at having 2 members of their dig team murdered in the space of just a few days, and now they found out that Layla wasn't qualified. Hang on a minute. 2 of their staff have died and they don't want to cooperate with the police. I didn't say they weren't cooperating. They're just taking a while to find somebody who can talk to us. That sounds like not cooperating to me. You want me to make a call? She asked. I'm fine as I am. She sighed. I'll leave it to you. Just tell me if you need anything from me, all right? Wait, before you go, he said. The post-mortem report. Whittaker called me about half an hour ago. Well, that's speedy for him. Dennis didn't respond to the sarcasm. The damage done to her head is very similar to what was inflicted on Archie, he said, and apparently there were remnants of metal in her jawbone. Leslie nodded. I've just had Gail on the phone. She found the same thing at the crime scene. Looks like we've got 1 weapon, which means 1 killer. Sleeping pills? Johnny muttered. What about sleeping pills? Leslie asked Dennis. I presumed there weren't any sign of them in Layla's body. Nothing, he replied. No substances, not even alcohol. So maybe Archie wasn't fed the sleeping pills by his killer after all, she said. Perhaps he just took them in large quantities. It was 4 times the normal dose, said Dennis. Still, that doesn't prove someone else fed them to him. No. Leslie turned to Johnny. I want to interview the bloke Susan's been having an affair with. He nodded. I've made some calls after I spoke to the neighbour. I've got a name, Tony Goodall, and you're not going to believe this. She raised an eyebrow. He's a copper, Johnny said. Works in fraud in Bristol. She gestured to the steering wheel. Even better. Let's track him down. Thanks for watching and listening. I leave you with some pictures of Dorset. Next time, I'll be dipping into Wartime BBC and Ed Murrow, and of course, a good supply of murder victims with Kate Parker's deadly broadcast. Goodbye.